And while U.S. President Donald Trump has said that a deal to end the Russia-Ukraine war is closer than ever.
But he reported no apparent breakthrough on the flashpoint issues of territory after new talks with the warring countries' leaders. Zelensky arrived at Mar-a-Lago early on Sunday afternoon as Russian air raids piled pressure on Kiev. Russia hit the capital and other parts of Ukraine with hundreds of missiles and drones, knocking out power and heat in parts of Kiev.
I don't have deadlines. You know what my deadline is? Getting the war ended. I don't have deadlines. You agree with that?
Well, much like when Zelensky last met Trump in October, Russian President Vladimir Putin spoke shortly beforehand with his U.S. counterpart on call, while Trump, addressing the media, insisted that both sides were serious about peace.
We had some times when he was close and President Putin wasn't. Then when President Putin was close and he wasn't, you saw that in the White House. But I think they both want to see it happen.
The current plan, revised after weeks of intense U.S.-Ukrainian negotiations, would stop the war at the current front lines in the eastern Donbass region and set up demilitarized areas, while Russia has long demanded territorial concessions. Trump offered to address the Ukrainian parliament to promote the plan.
Well, I think the land you're talking about, some of that land has been taken. Some of that land is maybe up for grabs, but it may be taken over the next period of a number of months. And are you better off making a deal now?
Well, after the talks, Zelensky and Trump spoke jointly by telephone with key European leaders who have been particularly alarmed about any decisions that would embolden Russia. Zelensky and the European leaders took to social media to thank Trump and welcome progress made on peace negotiations.
Zelensky said that the peace framework laid out by Trump was 90% agreed and that U.S.-Ukraine security guarantees 100% agreed. It showed Zelensky's openness to the revised U.S. plan, marking Kiev's most explicit acknowledgement yet of possible territorial concessions, although Ukrainian voters would need to approve it in a referendum. By contrast, Russia has shown no signs of compromise as it sees hope in the grinding gains it has made over 4 years against Ukrainian defenses.
Now, the Kremlin is in its readout of talks between Putin and Trump, called on Kiev to make a brave decision and immediately withdraw troops from Donbass, casting European leaders as the impediment to peace. Well, for more on this, we're now being joined by Dr. Charles Kupchan, live from Washington, D.C. He's the Senior Fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations. Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to have you on this show. Well, let's begin by talking about this. How positive, again, it looks, because this has happened before. It looks like it's a repeat. Somehow we see 100% security guarantees, but tough issues are still remaining. How positive does it look as of now?
You know, I think both leaders put a positive spin on the meeting. And clearly, I think Zelensky is trying to keep Trump on side and forge an agreement with Trump that the United States could then take to the Russians. But it doesn't appear that these conversations today led to any clear breakthrough on the key issues that separate Ukraine and Russia, including whether the Russians will convince the Ukrainians to voluntarily withdraw from that part of Donbass that Russia doesn't yet control, over the status of the Zaporizhia nuclear plant, which the Russians control, but the Ukrainians want to get back up and running, get power. And even though we're told that, yes, there is an agreement on security guarantees for Ukraine, and that's very important, because I think if Zelensky is going to sell to the Ukrainian Republic, to the Ukrainian public, some kind of withdrawal from Donbass, he needs to offer something in return. What is that in return? Security guarantees. But what those look like, who's going to put boots on the ground, whether the United States Senate will be asked to ratify these security guarantees, a lot of balls remain up in the air.
Dr. Kupchan, Donald Trump said that either it's going to end soon or it's going to go on for a long time. Is peace now hinged upon Ukraine agreeing to those land concessions? Because Russia has already made it clear that a political decision from Kiev on Donbass is what is going to end hostilities. How do you see that?
Well, I think clearly Zelensky has gotten the message that Putin is making territorial demands that could potentially bring this war to an end. And Zelensky has come up with a creative proposal of, well, we'll withdraw, but what will remain is a demilitarized zone, and you will also withdraw your forces from the same amount of land that we withdraw from. Do I think that the Russians are going to say yes to this proposal? No, I do not. And that's because Putin has made it quite clear that he wants Russia to control all of Donbass, and about 20 to 25% of Donetsk remains under Ukrainian control. Several 100,000 Ukrainians live there. And it's unclear, I think, that you're going to get an agreement, a ceasefire, unless and until the Ukrainians are prepared to cede that territory. They're not there yet, but Ukrainians are not in a great position now. There's a corruption scandal, they're short on manpower, they're short on money, they're short on weapons.
So, I mean, of course, now that you mentioned that, it almost looks like now Zelensky has to agree to it. But then when we talk about the constitution that he has been mentioning, will that allow Ukraine to actually cede these territories then?
Well, what Zelensky has said is that he's going to take this issue to a referendum. He's going to ask the Ukrainian people to vote on this question of the voluntary withdrawal from that part of Donbass not yet controlled by Russia. And that's where I think the security guarantees do come in, because the Ukrainians have lost hundreds of thousands of people defending this territory. They're not going to want to give up this land voluntarily after putting up such a fight, losing so many soldiers. And I think that's where Zelensky is going to have to make the case that this kind of sacrifice is worth it, because after we make the deal, the 80% of Ukraine that is on the other side of that ceasefire line will be free, secure, and enjoying security guarantees from the United States and Europe.
Well, all developments seem to be hinting that it's going to be Ukraine who will have to eventually, sooner or later, come to just saying yes to what Trump is going to be putting out on the table. We'll need to wait and watch how long it takes and how long it's going to take for the fighting to eventually stop on the front lines. Dr. Charles Kupchan, thanks so much for joining us here on World DNA. Always a pleasure speaking with you.
Good night.